missing someone. Love with all your heart. Missing someone. Love with heart.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. So this week I'm going to show you how to create a really bright blonde on dark hair with some old balayage highlights going on. So this is a client, she comes in every about 4 months or so, and she generally likes to keep her roots on the darker side, but today she wants to go fully bright blonde and just as light as possible all over. So we are going to focus on lightening her roots first, and then I am going to lighten up those mids and ends as well at the end. So I'm going to start off with sectioning out the hairline so that if she ever puts her hair up, we have beautiful color around the hairline. And everything around the hairline except where the money piece is, I like to just weave it, just kind of diffuse, soften the highlights a bit, opposed to just going ahead and doing a slice. Sometimes I feel like if I slice the hairline in the back here especially, it can look a little bit harsh. So I do like to break it up with a weave, and sometimes I'll do baby light on her. I did more of a medium-sized weave because I want her to feel like she has a lot of color, and everything else around for the rest of the head is pretty much going to be slices all throughout, only because she has a lot of dark within the root to mid area. So I want to lighten up that area as much as possible, and I feel like slicing does the best and you get the most amount of impact with that type of placement. So for my lightener today, I'm using my favorite lightener that is best used on dark hair, which is the Schwarzkopf Blonde Me Lightener. And I mixed up about 60 grams of developer, and I do about 30 grams of 6 volume to 30 grams of 20 volume. And I mix that with the powder. I do 1 part bleach to 2 parts of developer. That's just the consistency that I like to use with this. And then after those first bowl of about 60 grams of the developer, I will just use straight just 20 volume for the rest of the head. I just generally like to start with a lower volume whenever I'm doing a full balayage or highlight or anything like that. The only time I'll just straight go into just 20 volume is if I'm doing like a partial or something. But if I'm starting out in the back here at the nape, I always mix up a lower developer because I don't want the underneath to process way too quickly compared to the rest of the head, because I do start there in the back and it does process there for the longest part as I'm foiling the rest. And I find that using a slower developer, I'm able to not rinse everything out by the time I'm finished foiling. So I just like to generally use a lower developer so that it gives me enough time to foil the whole head without having to wipe or rinse out the bottom back. So now I'm going in and pretty much just slicing the back section all in one go. The hairline pieces that I detailed first, I generally like to do it I'll split it into 2 parts, and I'll do the hairline detail foil all the way up to where it reaches pretty much the top of the ear, because later I'll connect the back hairline piece and the front after I finish foiling the whole top mohawk of the head. So since she used to like her hair more on the rooty side, I really didn't heavy highlight her hair a lot in the past. But today, since she wants to go as blonde as possible, I am keeping my sections closer together and trying to get her as blonde as possible. She does have a lot of hair, so we are going to be doing a lot of foils back here just to make sure that she feels nice and bright. And then at the very end, we're not touching her roots right now as I'm foiling her, but at the very end, I am going to be doing a wet balayage that I like to do on a lot of my clients who just need an extra little bump or two of their level on the blonde pieces to help keep their blonde nice and bright. Also, while doing this sort of application, I am trying to be super careful. So some of my sections that I'm picking up, I can clearly see that I can just like paint right over, and that's where I had sliced before. But some sections I do have to kind of pick out the old highlights, and that is really crucial when you're trying to keep someone's hair as healthy as possible. I will take literally the extra time to pick out as much of the little piece of highlights as I can, because every hair counts, and when you're doing a highlight and getting someone super blonde, it's never great to overlap or anything like that. So I just like to be a little extra tedious and make sure that I'm really picking out as much as I possibly can. So now that I'm moving up to her money piece here, I do a few slices back to back because she wants to be super blonde. So I do about 2 slices back to back, and then I kind of blend them two together with a weave to kind of tie the front and back. And then I'm going to continue just like my slicing pattern, and after I finish up these sections that are pretty much her money piece, the next section is kind of crucial in the sense that it's going to really make my money piece pop. So I'll do another weave, and then anything beyond that, I do like to keep a little bit more dimension in between my foils, because I feel like having the dimension behind the money piece makes the money piece pop. Like if you have something that is light against something dark, it makes that lightness even lighter, opposed to if you had a blonde piece next to a really close blonde piece, it doesn't look it doesn't have anything to contrast to, so it doesn't look as bright. So I find that leaving a good little bit of dimension here in between from where my money piece is to blending the rest of the foils together is crucial to making that money piece really pop. So as I'm working towards, so now I've hit where I'm slicing and kind of blending the money piece and the back section, tying it together. So each slice that I'm going closer towards the back of the head, I am trying to mindfully leave a little bit more dimension than I did the previous section, so that it has a nice graduation of dimension towards the back. And then another thing that I do want to mention, if a client has like a side part or a super heavy side part and you're doing a mohawk section like this, it's really important to shift your mohawk section to wherever their part is. So her mohawk section isn't perfectly in the center of her head because she always does a side part. And again, I know I'm doing such a super like close together heavy highlight for this transformation, but sometimes she'll come in and she'll be like she wants her roots to be a little bit more blended. So we don't technically always do a really heavy highlight like this. Sometimes we'll do this maybe like once or twice a year, and then we'll go back to kind of blending it out. And this is what's really important to keep the ends nice and solid, because if I don't do a full close heavy highlight like this every other session or every 2 sessions or so, then the dimension starts peeking through the ends and it makes the client feel like they're not as blonde as they would want to be. So this is going to really help create that really solid end look where you feel like, or the client feels like, they have a lot of color and there's a beautiful blend between their natural root, and then there's like a mid area where the highlights start to blend into where the solid ends are. Okay, so now that I'm working on the sides here, since this isn't technically the top money piece, I am not slicing. I'm just going in and starting to weave this part out. And I do a few of these just to kind of keep the front looking a lot lighter than the back. And then after that, I'm going to connect the front and the back, and I love doing this part because it's super fast and super easy to just kind of do a detail hairline right above the ear and then just continue my weave and slicing pattern up in this section, all together connecting that front and back. So let's say that after today's appointment, the next time she comes in for her 4-month touch-up, she wants to kind of have a little bit of a softer regrowth, have something a little bit different. So what I would do next time, if she felt like she was too blonde this time and maybe just wants something that will grow out a little bit softer, is I will just start my slices and leave a little bit more room in between them to kind of soften these highlights. And I would gauge that depending on how thick their hair is, because if you do it on someone who has really coarse, dense hair and you leave too much room in between the slices, sometimes they can look a little too like stripy. And so I like to just gauge it by how dense their hair is, and then see kind of how it might fall. And then of course at the end, after I do like some slices in between, you can blend out the lines with a shadow root. So just over time you'll be more familiar with how much negative space to leave in between your highlights, but I feel like it really is determined by how dense their hair is, because if a client had super fine hair, I would probably leave a little bit, or my spacing between my slices would be a little bit further apart, opposed to someone who has really coarse hair, only because if someone has finer hair and not a lot of it, then the hair is definitely more see-through, and if you over highlight the hair, you won't see as much dimension because there isn't that much hair to kind of blend your highlights together. So it really depends on the density of the hair and trying to master that part of spacing out and positioning your highlights. So while I'm working on the sides here, what I'm looking for is pretty much any parts or slices of dimension that are really long that I left out last time. So I'm purposely going through and trying to pick out the pieces that have the longest root and just highlight those pieces, because that is what's going to, one, make her ends feel a lot brighter, and then that will also overall just make her feel a lot blonder if I'm able to highlight most of the longest root as I'm going through it. And that's also why it's really important to have a very similar highlighting format or blueprint for every client so that you can easily pick up where you left off last time. Okay, so now that her highlights are fully done processing, I have already had my assistant shadow root my client, and so when I have them shadow root my clients, I'll have them shadow root it like an inch behind the hairline, because I'll shadow root the hairline once I tone everything at the end. So I'll apply the shadow root, and then we'll do kind of like a wet balayage as the hair is wet, like you see now at the bowl, just like this. And what this is going to do is it's going to brighten the blonde, take out any mineral buildup, and take out any old toner or like buildup of purple shampoo, and just really re-brighten the ends so that we can have a really bright blonde. And so for her shadow root, I believe we used the Pulp Bright Liquid Demis, and we created a 7-1, which is a level 7, and the 1 stands for ash, so it's a level 7 ash, which is a little bit more blue based, just to kind of make it as ashy as possible. So once the ends are pretty much done processing, I usually will check in about like every 7 to 10 minutes on this part. I believe we left this on for just maybe a little bit over 15 minutes on her hair, and then rinse it out completely. And then we toned her with the high-speed toners from Pulp Riot, and I did Silver Violet Moonstone all equal parts, and I mixed that 1:2 with 6 volume. And how we apply that is we'll apply it to the mids, brush it through to the ends, and kind of just gradually put a little bit product on the ends so that the ends don't overtone, because a lot of times too, the oldest part of your hair can be the most porous part and can grab the toner a little bit quickly. So that's why we like to brush it out and only apply where it's necessary on the ends. Alrighty guys, so here is the finished look. You can see how beautiful and bright this blonde looks. The shadow root really blended the highlights super well, considering that we sliced her whole head. And you can tell that the blonde is definitely a lot brighter, and it really does go and blend very well with her roots as well. So even though we did a super heavy highlight this time, this is going to last her quite a while, and next time we could definitely do another heavy highlight and get her a little bit more solid, or she totally has the option to pick the more blended route and start blending her roots like we were before as well. Alrighty guys, that is it for this week's episode. Thank you guys so much for watching and tuning in, and as always, I will talk to you guys next week.